This is a part two of what boards need to know about special education. All right, so if you're not familiar with Indigo Education, their mission is to strengthen public education by enhancing and improving special education services and educator development, ensuring all students receive the high quality education they deserve. So I will pass it on over to you all at Indigo.
Thank you,
Thank
Holly.
you. My name's Hannah Peterson, and I'm Director of Operations at Indigo Education.
And my name is Erin Lavery. I'm the Executive Director at INDIGO Education.
And so, yes, you may have heard part one, and we might repeat ourselves just a little bit, and you maybe also will be watching via recording. So again, we'll reiterate potentially some of the information we shared, or we will be sharing some new resources. And please, if you have any questions, send via email, chat, and we'll always be happy to follow up. We do a lot of relationships through you all. Again, our community is a tight-knit community. And again, we are always working to make sure that we have best practice in all areas through the Department of Education, seeking information, what's coming through program finance, program monitoring, what's happening in the educational landscape through academics, discipline. And then we also have been working through a grant to get more licensed teachers into the field. And then we also have been a part of the Blue Ribbon Commission that Erin will be speaking to a little bit later today as well. And again, we have a lot of, continued professional relationships through licensed administrators, MACE for special educators, MASBO, school business officials, Council for Exceptional Children. We are a nonprofit, and that's how we've gotten to know CharterSource and the Minnesota Council for Nonprofits. And then where we are located is, again, we're surrounded by some fantastic nonprofits around the state of Minnesota in our co-working space. Speaking of community, Erin will get us started.
So within our organization, we've identified 5 ways in which school communities, and when I say school communities, I do include the school board. And so just so you know, when I use that word throughout the context of our conversation, know that it is quite inclusive of school boards. And so through our work at Indigo Education, we've developed a program evaluation tool that includes assessment, if you will, or providing feedback to schools around family engagement, school climate, curriculum instruction, IEP compliance, and instructional practices. And so for the sake of time, I won't read through each of these definitions, but knowing that we have found these 5 indicators as a way to provide a robust program to serve students with special needs. And on the next slide, we've created a visual just to say that we work with schools moving from an accountability zone to alignment and to integration. And this is also where our school boards help to keep schools accountable. And then again, moving towards capturing the mission and the vision as schools work to move all facets of their special education program or the district, if you will, into an integration zone. And I say this and knowing that all schools are constantly developing and changing, and given the mandates from the Department of Education and changes in leadership, these 5 segments will differ from time to time. Holly and her team have identified a number of roles and responsibilities for board members. And if you've engaged in Holly's training over the past number of years, you would see the next, I believe there are 7 indicators for maybe 6, I'm not sure. Roles and responsibilities of the school board. So again, that big picture thinking, helping to provide, asking some curious questions for the board, excuse me, for school directors and other leadership, those in leadership to ask more questions about how are we mitigating risk to our charter school? How are we moving forward to our strategic plan? And what are ways that the school board can help to remove obstacles that may impede our forward progress on our mission and vision? And so really there's an intersection between the roles and responsibilities that Holly's team has identified and then the framework that we have identified for program evaluation. And really, I would say the summary of all that is for the board to have awareness, not necessarily of the day-to-day, but awareness of the assets of the district as well as barriers. And when I'm speaking about the board and the district and certainly the authorizer relationship, I do want to talk just through the intersectionality and having a peaceful and productive relationship. I know that sometimes there are questions that the school leaders will need to answer, and sometimes those may be complicated conversations, but knowing that we are all working together to support children who have an opportunity in Minnesota to have school choice and enroll in our charter school community. Recently, you may have heard about some complicating factors. I'll just say that as a general comment regarding just finances in general for schools, but in particular, school funding for special education programs. And so for the next segment, we'll talk through special education finance as a way to describe your special education program in a quantitative way rather than a qualitative way, meaning, we're telling the story. And so our verbal telling of the story, or perhaps if you're giving someone a tour of your school, we're able to show in a visual way or through anecdotes how it looks and feels to be a member of the school's climate and culture. And as a mirror image of that, we should be able to assign the way we spend money into different pockets so that those are working in tandem in terms of the story, the narrative, and then also where we are spending our state and federal funds. So just in brief, Hannah and I have the next 2 slides just to articulate where your schools receive funding for your special education programs. Essentially, we receive it through the state of Minnesota, the federal government. If you want to go ahead, Hannah. Third-party billing, meaning there are some services that we can bill as a local education agency to medical assistance and private insurance. The conversation is complicated, and I think it's worth another chat to say that school districts are able to tap into this funding source, and this does not have a negative impact on families and their rates and whatnot. It is a delicate conversation, and a person who is a leader at your school or a person who is well-versed in having this conversation with families is really the most expert one, because anytime we're talking about involving insurance that that just really is complicated and somewhat threatening to families. So again, it is an option. We can talk about that more. However, it is a delicate conversation. The largest part of our conversation at this point right now, as well as the state funding, is tuition billing. And so again, I won't bore you with the details. However, as charter schools, there are students obviously who enroll in our spaces, and as such, we enroll all students because we are public entities. And Minnesota is special in this way in that I would describe Minnesota as a pure charter school model rather than students needing a voucher or students needing to have a certain level of skill to enroll in a charter school. So again, charter schools have the same responsibilities as traditional public schools and are under the similar state, please retract that, under the same state and federal guidelines as traditional public schools. And the interesting component there is that while we have students enrolled in our charter schools who have IEPs, it is the responsibility of the traditional public school wherein the child resides to pay the charter school for the child's special ed programming. And so if we have a student who lives in, let's say Minneapolis, and they go to Friendship Academy, Minneapolis Public Schools pays for that student's special education programming while enrolled at Friendship Academy. This is a complicating factor, and you may have seen this in the newspaper and other places where you receive your information, in that entities like Minneapolis Public Schools need to make cuts to their budget. And part of the reason, in order to be direct, will say that in compensating or paying for the special education programming at a charter school, institutions like Minneapolis Public Schools have some unpredictability to their budgets, and they will need to use more of their allocated special education funds to pay for the programming at charter schools within that area. And so when they do that, they have less money to pay for their own special education programming and will need to take money from their general ed budget to offset those costs. I do want to say that while I'm sharing this information, I'm providing information in a neutral way, and I'm not saying that any way that charter schools are spending their money is inappropriate, or boards and authorizers and school leaders should be cutting costs right now. But it is our responsibility to be responsible for the money that we receive and be good stewards of that money. And as school boards, you're really understanding where all of this funding is going, right? And then also, our students conferring benefit, our students learning as a result of what we're spending on our program, because that's the ultimate goal there. So just to keep things interesting, the Department of Education has provided us another challenge, and I'll leave my comments out of that. But we'll say that by the end of this school year, there's a group of people named on called the Blue Ribbon Commission. And there's about, let's say, 12 of us, or 12 to 15 of us, who have been assigned to work together to think of ways that the state of Minnesota can reduce $300 million from the state special education budget. It's complicated because the federal law that drives special education does call for a fully funded way in which to provide services to children. And as we know, we do not receive 100% of our allotment from the federal government from school to pay for our special education services. So on the next slide, we understand that while the call is to eliminate $300 million from the state special education budget, meaning that each school will receive less money from the state of Minnesota, as public schools, we are obligated to still provide a program that is appropriate for all children with IEPs, that is driven by research and best practices and licensed teachers. So again, with that, I think that it would be helpful if the role of the board members would have sympathy for the school director, and you all have a challenge in terms of your decision making, in terms of creating efficiencies, but then also being mindful that over the course of the next few years, there will be a decrease in revenue coming to your school district. Now, again, the decision hasn't been made, but in collaboration with a business management entity and some authorizers, I do feel like it is mindful just to plan for a decrease in compensation for your school. I talked about this slide a few moments ago when I had mentioned that a portion of the resident district's funds does become allocated to the charter school in which a student is enrolled, thus driving or kind of forcing their hand into where they're going to be able to spend in the traditional public school district. And so those districts as well, just like us, are required to program for students with licensed teachers, with research-based practices and all the like. While there's a charge from the governor to decrease $300 million, we understand that overall running a school in general and creating a proper special education program for students to confer benefit is becoming more expensive on an annual basis. So on this slide here, we have identified a number of ways in which programming has an increased cost. And Hannah and I are going to try to move through a couple of presentations here. So the presentation that Hannah is pulling up is one that was provided to the Minnesota community, if you will, from the state of Minnesota. And this presentation was developed in January of 2025. So while it's a year in the past, the data really remains the same. The slide that you see here is MDE's, Minnesota Department of Education's assessment of the ways in which costs are increasing. And then in the next few slides here, we'll talk about those in particular. As the years progress, we are seeing that more and more students are being identified as individuals with special needs. And in large part, this is a byproduct of our school district's ability to really assess students in our assessment tools and our studies are getting more and more specific and able to identify students and their needs, as well as each school district has a general education curriculum that you offer to the entire population of children, and then ways in which to provide interventions to children, because some students need just a little boost or a long-term intervention to help them make progress as they move through their educational career or through their school year. And then should students need more than a short-term or a long-term intervention, that's where we really get curious to see if a child has a disability. And as you can see through the slide that Hannah has up here, is that the numbers through the state of Minnesota continue to increase. So a question that you may ask of your school leader is, how many students within your school community are identified as people with disabilities? And certainly Hannah and I, again, or your school leader or your director of special education will be able to show you a report on the Department of Education website. But we'll show you an example here in a moment of a charter school's child count information.
You want me to go to that one now?
Yes, please. So I wonder, Hannah, if you can highlight the row that says students with IEPs served birth to age 21, or just put your cursor on it. That'd be super. So yep. As you can see here, Avalon is the school that we're talking about. And during the 23-24 school year, they were serving 154 children or young adults with disabilities, and that dropped down just a titch for the 24-25 school year. So that is just a point of information that a school board may want to ask, knowing that student data in particular is private, but knowing how many students you are educating on a year-to-year basis is a point of information, and knowing in particular when there are large spikes in enrollment and or decreases, as that affects your budget in many ways anyhow. Hannah, I'm sorry to throw you off here. If you just want to stay there, that's fine. On a slide, you'll receive this presentation from Holly. On a slide that we have in the presentation, you'll see the average per pupil expenditure. So Hannah, you're going to just want to hit me. If you can go back to the Avalon slide, that would be helpful. Presentation. So below the row that Hannah just showed you about how many students are enrolled in your charter school, you'll see the district average. And so we see here that the district average, yep, of the expenditures for this program is about $12,000 for the 23-24 school year, and then $14,000 for each student at Avalon. So another question to ask, in addition to how many children with IEPs do we serve at such and such a charter school, is what is our per pupil expenditure? Again, in the presentation that Hannah and I have for you, you'll see the district average The average expenditure in general for charter schools is more than the traditional public schools. Again, that's due to a number of factors. And again, that isn't necessarily bad. We just want to understand the story as to where our funds are being assigned. Something that is another, when we had outlined the slides here, we had identified that the just employment of staff just costs more and more. That's largely due to insurance increasing. It feels like exponentially every year. Certainly, there are rate increases from time to time, depending on your school's policies that you've developed as a board. But in general, it just costs more to employ people at this time. While that is something that we can't control, one thing that is helpful for a board to ask is, what are we doing to recruit and retain teachers? There is a hidden cost when we are when teachers resign, we're hiring people. So even just posting the job on your website, interviewing a myriad of people, deciding on, the candidate that makes most sense to you, going through contract negotiation, and then onboarding that person in terms of your school's climate and culture and things identified in the handbook, but then also the practices within your special education department. And for individuals coming out of a traditional public school sector, there is a little bit more of a learning curve for those individuals now coming into the charter segment. So the part that we can control is understanding how we're taking care of our teachers, essentially. And so are there ways that the school district is assigning funds for professional development or collaboration with other professionals within the school building? And that could be other special education teachers or general education teachers and the like. Through this presentation, and I think you probably know as a group, because you are, as a board, are approving contracts, that your contracted services and those expenditures continue to increase over time. And this is most evident during the 24 school years. Now, in our charter school community, we really rely on contracted services quite a bit. And again, that has a number of variables, but it is something that, as a school board, you are certainly welcome to ask and have certainly the need to know how much money you're spending on a variety of contracts. And as we have learned through the Department of Education and the Charter Center there, we do need, if you will, extra steps to approve contracts that are over a certain monetary limit. So a question that you may want to ask as a school board and process with your school leader is, how much are we spending on an annual basis, let's say for our speech provider? And are we at a moment where it is wise to certainly post for an employee providing speech services? And what is the benefit there? As you know from working in the charter school community, it is difficult to find certain providers, and contracting with a multitude of agencies is wise due to their expertise. And also sometimes that really is the best option, as due to difficulty finding individuals who we can employ full-time with certain specialized licenses. The next slide that Hannah has up here is a number of school years. So the top row is the 22-23 school year, and then the middle section is 23-24 school year, and then the percentage there. And as you can see, as a charter school community, we do on the whole spend more on contracted services than traditional districts and cooperatives. Again, like I had said previously, sometimes our hand is forced, but this is something to be mindful in terms of potentially seeking individuals who may be employed at your districts or collaborating with other school districts or other charter schools to purchase services. The next identified area, as you can see from Hannah's slide here, is the amount of money that is being spent on an annual basis for transporting children with IEPs to and from school. Again, this is an IEP team decision, meaning caregivers, the special education teacher, and other relative people working with the child are talking through this process and the necessity thereof. And so it is oftentimes imperative for a child to have special transportation in order for them to get to school on a regular basis in a safe way. So again, as the overall theme that we're trying to share here is an awareness of expenditures and understanding if that's proportional to your population, and then again, if it is imperative to the child's school experience and their ongoing ability to make progress on the goals that are identified in their IEPs. So as Hannah and I have shared with you in preceding slides, we've identified 5 ways in which a school can ensure that they have a comprehensive program for students with IEPs. And so one of those first indicators is school climate. And questions that are appropriate, I will say, to ask as your school leaders, to include your director of special education, lead teachers, and your school director, are just ways in which, how is our climate in this a school welcoming of children with disabilities and including them in the overall general population of our school? And how are we providing training to the entire population, but how are we providing training for teachers who are general education teachers about how to include our students, meaning students with disabilities, into the general education space, because students with disabilities are general education students first. The next portion that we've identified for program evaluation is curriculum and instruction. So again, this is an area in which you will see as a school board as an expenditure line for your special education expenses. And what we're asking schools to do is to make sure that you have a robust manner in which you are providing instruction. So research-based materials, not materials that are kind of downloaded from the internet, and we're teaching while special educators are teaching in a one-on-one or small group manner, that they are in alignment with state standards. The curriculum instruction piece also does support the teacher retention and recruitment, as we as special educators really need a guide as to what we are working with students on, and again, not kind of scrambling for resources. Autonomy is super, but too much autonomy really takes away from, the research component of education, which is required. In terms of instructional practices, I feel like I've covered that with the professional development that we've mentioned, as well as the curriculum and instruction piece. I do want school boards and stakeholders to know that burnout for special education teachers, really it's a 3 to 5 year period. And that is a research-based response. It is unavoidable that teachers will feel a sense of alienation, that they're not able to support students enough. And the reasons why they have come into teaching special education based on a calling or their social emotional skills does become eroded because of the technical aspects of the work, writing the IEPs, attending meetings, and all of that. And so the gifts that teachers are bringing into the field over time does dissipate. And so really teachers between the years of 3 to 5 will experience this. And so it is helpful really for a school board and the school leader to think about ways that we are lifting up and supporting our special education and general education staff in terms of being aware of the complexity of the workload and providing professional development, even as far as professional development in the area of conflict resolution. Because while we are inundated with quite a bit of paperwork, a large part of our role as special education teachers is collaborating with other staff, parents, etc., and addressing conflict, whether minor or significant, on really a daily basis. Family engagement, as you know, as a board is imperative for any functioning school district. And we do want our families who have children in their care with special needs to feel like they are also in the fabric of the school community. And again, that does include providing families information on how to navigate the special education process, advocating for families, and keeping our meetings with families student-centered, and again, helping school staff and families mitigate conflict. As you're well aware, of this portion, working on developing proper IEPs and evaluations to support those IEPs is very complex. And there is a higher level of scrutiny for special education teachers because in addition to creating IEPs and paperwork that is representative of the quality of your school and really the way in which you do business internally, the Department of Education on a cycle reviews our special education department and does want to know really about how we're doing in this area. And so going back to the burnout, there's teachers will have anxiety over this because they certainly want to perform well for you and do their best for families. But then there is this entity who will be directly or indirectly evaluating some of their work, and that creates a lot of fear and pressure that frankly just adds to the complexity of the role. So I think in conclusion, I'd like to just reiterate that the role of the board, in my opinion, really does lean towards awareness of the challenges within the school community and really the challenges that are in the community at large, the way that ICE presence and other crises in our community have impacted the way in which schools are able to support families, and as well as the trauma that is being navigated by school staff, right? As we feel that in ourselves and then also try to support children. So again, awareness of the climate and the culture of our school and the complexity of the role, but knowing that really your school finance and your school expenditures should be able to tell the story about how you're providing services to children. I don't want school boards or teachers or anyone to feel intimidated by the concept of school finance, because it really is a mindset of how we're supporting children. The accounting and the detail work, we can leave that up to business managers to, do that kind of work. But really, school finance is not something that you should shy away from or feel awkward about asking, because it really is a foundation of how you provide services to your students and then ensure the longevity of your charter school community.